For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Castanon, and I am the school library media specialist at the elementary schools in Pine Hill, New Jersey. I work at both the Dr. Albert Bean and the John Glenn Elementary School. In the beginning of April, author and illustrator Barbara McClintock was supposed to visit with our students and talk to them about what life is like as both an author and an illustrator. Unfortunately, due to the current situation, she will be unable to visit us in person. She did agree, though, to sit down and do a virtual question and answer session with me earlier today. She had some amazing answers and some very inspiring advice for our future authors and illustrators. I hope you enjoy our presentation. So first of all, I want to say hi and thank you. We have Barbara McClintock here with us today, and we're going to do a quick question and answer with her since unfortunately, because of what's going on, we can't have her come to our school right now. So hi, Barbara. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's good to meet all of you. Like not in person, but close to it. Next best thing. Yeah.
So first, if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I came up with a couple questions. I asked my own kids to give us a couple questions that we could ask you. So if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself first, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, I have always drawn. I love drawing pictures. I love telling stories. And the way that I draw is narrative, what we would call narrative. So all the pictures I draw, the characters are dancing and moving around and tending to tell a story. So it's just natural that I became an illustrator and kind of working with written stories as well as just drawing the pictures. I've always loved to draw. My very first memory was of lying on my stomach on the kitchen floor, and I was about 3 years old with a crayon in each hand, drawing gigantic circles, like a big slinky going across a page. And my mom's biggest fear was of running out of paper, because if there was no paper, I still kept drawing. So I drew on the floor, I drew on the walls, I drew on the inside of the kitchen cabinet doors, I drew on the bottom of pots and pans, and I once drew on the refrigerator, and I got into like major trouble doing that. So all of you out there, promise not to draw on refrigerators. You get into big trouble doing that. So yeah, but always all through school, even into middle school and high school, I drew. And I have a big confession to make, which is that I am not really great at math. So when I was in middle school and high school, any teachers, I love my teachers. Teachers are like, big shout out to teachers out there. They are real heroes, and they really care about their students and try to work with them in a way to find what those students do best, and how to apply it to their lessons. So because I wasn't really good at math, like my biology teacher gave me assignments drawing mollusks and salamanders and tarantulas and snakes, and so that I had a way to engage with biology, and because I would have been lost doing the math related homework. So I just was born to draw. I just love doing it. It's great. So anyway, that kind of catches you up with my background a little
Yes,
bit.
that's awesome. I love how your teachers were able to do that for you.
Yeah.
So, our first question was what inspired you? So obviously you just told us that your love of drawing. How did that turn over into you becoming also an author?
Well, originally, I drew more than I wrote. But when I was probably, oh gosh, I want to say in the third and fourth grade, I started creating comic books.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first venture into books. And I wanted to talk about the characters had the characters that I was drawing, cats and dogs and some people and members of my family, because I was showing them like kind of moving around and doing stuff. I wanted to actually have them speak. So I had them, like, I wrote dialogue in word balloons. And then I started looking at comics because I love to read comics. And I drew panels and I drew cartoon characters, my characters, like in sequential panels, telling a story both through what they were doing in the picture, but also by writing the text. So I kind of grew both things at the same time. And then when I was 19 years old, um, I moved to New York City from North Dakota. I challenge anyone out there to tell me where North Dakota is. It's like not a place a lot of people have really ever necessarily heard of or ever been to. Very, very flat and rural, lots of farms and stuff. So anyway, I moved from there to New York City to start my career as an illustrator. And at first, I was just doing drawings, illustrations for other people's manuscripts, other authors' things that they had written. And at a certain point, I thought, well, I have a story to tell. So I taught myself to write. I taught myself to draw. I did not go to art school. I didn't, I just didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't afford to go to an art school. So I'd go to my public libraries and check out books about drawing, excuse me. And I just like find an artist that I liked. And I would take the book and open it up and just draw, copy pictures from a book and then close it, bring it back to the library, get another book. And I did the same thing with writing. I just found authors I liked. I read as much as I could. And I started thinking, well, how do they make this story so interesting? It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has interesting characters. So I think for all of anybody listening to this, what you need is a passion and a motivation to make something work. But all the pieces of the puzzle are out there. If you read, if you go to your library, you can learn a lot just on your own.
Very interesting. Where do you get your ideas for your books?
Well, I get my ideas. Excuse me, I have to have a little sip of coffee. Sorry.
No problem.
Um, well, I get my ideas from things that I remember from my childhood, like the pets I had, my family, my friends, um, where I lived, what my house looked like, what my room looked like. And I kind of put those things together. But another way that I find out or get ideas for stories is through other books that I read. So, for example, for my book Vroom, which is about a little girl in a sports car who goes driving around, and I found a story about somebody in a bicycle who starts out in one spot and just all day long keeps riding their bicycle all around the countryside and into the city and over bridges and over hills and comes home again. And that's how I came up with the idea for my book Vroom. And I've got some little props here, if you don't mind my taking you around my studio.
No, not at all. That's awesome.
Okay, so I'm in my studio right now, and I love my studio. My studio is a really cool room. It's my room. People can only come in if I invite them to come in. And I only put things in here that I like. So I have things that make me really happy or inspire me. And one of the things I have is for my book Vroom. And of course, why didn't I think to bring a copy in here? Hold on, we might be traveling around the house a little bit. So this is a sports car that it's an old toy, something my dad had given me. And I use that as a prop in my book Vroom. So now we're going to go into the rest of the house. So if I'd come to your school, you wouldn't have gotten this little tour here. This, this is my dining room, and we're going to go through the living room here. So because I work at home, I can kind of put stuff in my house. I love plants, so these are real trees in my living room. Because I work at home, I can put stuff that I really like in my in my house. This is a picture done by a friend of mine, Carrie. This is an old clock that just made that sound. But this painting was done by a friend who is severely autistic. She is deaf, and she couldn't communicate with the world until she figured out how to paint and draw. So that's another really powerful message, I think, that can come from what artwork can do for you and storytelling. So anyway, so this is my book Room, and maybe some of you have seen this, and it's one of many books that I've done. And every book I do has found some kind of inspiration. And Annie's kind of a lot like me. I have a little silver sports car that I love to drive, and I kind of just take off. I don't let anything kind of slow me down. So, and I actually have a helmet that I wear sometimes. I have been out on a racetrack driving, and here she is. She's hopping into her car, and then she takes off, and she zooms out of her bedroom window across her yard, excuse me, and here she is flying along, and the cat and the dog are just sort of like going, what is going on here? So and here she is flying along a road, and she has just left her house and she's driving up this road. And this is a lot like where I grew up in North Dakota. There are farms. It's a very flat landscape. And I show tractors and little grain trucks and cows and horses. And she's driving along this very, very, very flat area, but she's getting tired of driving along in something that's flat, and she is thinking of going up into the mountains. So anyway, that's just a little bit about this book. So you can see that I kind of found inspiration in the stuff that I like. I like to drive. I like driving my little sports car. I remembered things from my past and my family. And then I found stuff that I surrounded myself with in my studio. Oh, one more thing. Hold on. I have also, so this is a cupboard where I keep a lot of things, very special things that I don't want the cats knocking over. So I kind of keep things in my cupboard. And I have these little characters. Another way that I figure out how to create books and inspiration is I make little cutout characters of, like, this is Annie, and this is Annie walking over to her car. So I could just sort of play around and have her sit in her car and take off and drive around.
So cute.
So it's just, it kind of gets, my creative juices flowing, and,
I
gets
love
thinking
that.
about things. So I highly recommend making paper cutouts. It's a lot of fun, and, just play. Play is important for
Yeah.
creativity.
I think the kids would love doing that. That's something we should try in the library. I
Great.
love that.
Oh, great.
Of your books, is there a favorite one you have, the ones that you've written or illustrated?
Oh, that's like, so I've written and illustrated over 40 books, and it's like, these are all my children. And it's picking out my favorite child, and the others couldn't find out, and, just be a problem. I don't know. I love all of them. I would say maybe there are a couple that really stand out. I think Vroom is great. I think Emma and Julia love ballet. I know you mentioned that.
Yeah, we love that one.
And I think Nothing Stops Sophie, because that shows courage and determination. My Adele and Simon series. I think books that show courage and sort of, kind of going on despite, really hard times like we're going through right now. Being
Perfect.
resourceful and finding ways around, circumstances that aren't really wonderful. That's good. That's a good thing.
So when you're writing or illustrating, if you get stuck, what do you do? How do you help yourself if you can't figure out how to make the perfect drawing, or if you can't figure out the perfect wording? Do you have a trick you use, or is there something you do to help you get through that time being stuck?
Yeah. Well, usually if I'm really stuck, I'll just walk out of the studio. I will go take a walk. I'll just walk around the neighborhood. I'll hang out with the cats for a little while. I think it's important. Sometimes when you get stuck, it's because you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to make something perfect or right. So you kind of just have to step back and find a playful place again. So if I am stuck, if I'm writing a story, sometimes I'll just write what I think of as the review of the book. So if I'm writing about Annie and Room, and I'm kind of stuck thinking about, well, what's going to happen? How am I going to make this? So I'll just put on my reviewer voice and I'll say, Barbara McClintock's book Room is about, a brave little girl who jumps in a sports car and takes off and drives around, and it kind of helps you shape the story, from like stepping back, stepping away. But that I think is really constructive, just to not force yourself to keep hammering away at it. I mean, keep going with it, but
Mhm.
put it away for a little while, have a cup of tea, just talk to your cats,
Perfect.
that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So when you're writing your books, do you like to write or illustrate first, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. I have sketchbooks that I use to develop characters, and um, so I might have an idea about wanting to do a book. Using more coffee.
You're
About,
talking a lot.
I just did a rendition of The Three Little Kittens. So that was an already established story. So I wanted to find another way to make it more contemporary. So I started doing, excuse me, I have a visitor here.
Hi, aw.
Nick, this is Nick, everybody. Nick's going away. Bye, Nick. Uh, uh, so I think that I try to, I do a little bit of both. I carry a sketchbook with me at all times, and I doodle a lot. And I'll write down ideas, or I'll do a little drawing of a character I might think of. And then I do a little text and a little drawing. So it just goes back and forth a little bit. So,
Interesting. Um, Other than yourself, do you have a favorite children's author that you get inspiration from, or you just like to read?
oh my gosh, there are so many. I just really, I've been reading a lot of the Princess in Black books recently.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I love that. And Wen Pham happens to be a personal friend of mine, so
Right.
yeah, so that's been really good. And I just have I love the work of Marie Sendak. So I'm a lot older than probably anybody looking at this. So I remember things from my childhood, like the little bear stories and
Mhm.
things like that. I like you know, Japanese stories. I like Japanese animation. It's just, so I would have to say my favorites probably would be Marie Sendak.
Nice. We actually, at one of our elementary schools, they just started an anime club to have the kids start doing like different types of art with actually with the gym teacher. He loves it. So he started a club with the art teacher, and
Oh,
the kids are
perfect.
having so much fun with it.
Oh, that is really good. I love Kiki's Delivery Service. I love Spirited Away. All of those Misaki films I think are wonderful. He's such a great storyteller.
Yeah.
And I was in Tokyo and Kyoto a couple of years ago, and I went to the Museum of Manga in Kyoto, and they had some of his original drawings from
Oh,
some of his
wow.
films. It was like amazing. It's
That's so
great.
cool.
So yeah.
Do you like illustrating your own books or others' books, other people's books, other authors' books?
Oh, that's kind of interesting. When you illustrate something somebody else has written, it's like you get in the back seat of the car and somebody drives you around. But you don't get to tweak things to make them work with your drawings quite as much
Oh,
as you do your own work.
right,
So they're different experiences. I like having both. You get to tell all of your own story if you write it yourself,
right.
but it's really nice to have that input from somebody else sometimes.
When you're drawing your pictures, how many times do you draw them?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm working on something right now, and it's been taking me days and days and days. Here's like a very, probably can't see this too well.
No, you can
Like
see great.
I use tracing paper, and I should just hold up the computer and show you. This is a table just full, full of revised sketches. See
Oh,
all of
wow.
that? Can you
Yeah.
see? It's just like I draw things over and over and over again. You just can't give up. It looks, what I want is somebody to pick up my book and say like, oh, it looks like she just did this off the top of her head. There's no effort in this at all, but there's a lot. And also when I revise and redo things, it's kind of like I get to know the drawing and the character better and better and better. So it's not just torture, it's, a revision. It's kind of, you get to understand something more. And I like that. I'm very curious, really like figuring out how things work.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, revision's good.
So when you do your writing, do you like to do you do any of it on the computer or is it all done by hand? All your like writing and drawing?
Uh, well, it's all done by hand. I would really like to. I'm trying to learn how to use Procreate on an iPad, and I am a bit resistant to it. But yeah, it's pretty much all done by hand. Yeah,
Wow, that's awesome.
tracing paper, pen and ink, markers. I use a lot of markers. Here's my marker drawer, so you can see all of the
Oh,
markers
wow.
I have, a big variety, and pencils and papers, and it just I like the feeling that touching things and
Yeah,
paper and that kind of stuff. So, but most of my friends do their artwork digitally.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
And you answered this earlier. You said you never went to art school, right?
No, I did not. I went, uh, once I had actually started working, I went to a place called the Art Students League briefly. You could drop in and take classes on a month by month basis.
Hmm.
So there was a professor, an artist whose work I liked. And so I studied with him just for a few months. But I am passionate about drawing,
Hmm.
and I just taught myself. Yeah.
That's really amazing. So you don't need a lot of money to learn to do something you love.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You just have to do it a lot. You have to work a lot.
That's
That's,
great. I
yeah,
love that.
yeah.
So do you keep yourself to a daily schedule or is it just however the mood strikes you? Is there a favorite time of day you have to write and draw?
Well, often it's good to get up in the morning and just start drawing and working in my studio, because then I'm not distracted. I just
Mhm.
have, kind of like things are kind of wide open, and I um I can work, this time of quarantine. I sort of realize I self quarantine most of the time because I'm working. And if it depends on the stage of a project, if I'm just starting a project, it's kind of like we were talking about writer's block earlier. Sometimes it just takes a while to get into a project, so that I will take a walk, I'll go to the grocery store. Um, so I may spend fewer hours actually sitting and drawing. But once I'm really working with a deadline, I can spend 10 or 12 hours just sitting at my drawing board working. So it just depends on where I am with the project. Um, so that, I hope that answers your
Yeah,
question.
absolutely.
Good.
Um, and how do people find you to illustrate for them? Is it something you do through an agent or is it that you have relationships already with authors?
Well, I do have an agent, and authors don't contact me. And that's kind of a interesting process of how publishing works.
Mhm.
An editor will contact my agent and say, oh, I have a manuscript written by somebody. I think Barbara would be a great person to illustrate it. And that then my agent will send the manuscript to me and I'll look at it and I'll say, yeah, this really speaks to me, or no, I don't think so. This isn't working. And but I think a lot of people think that the author talks to the illustrator. There rarely, sometimes that happens if there's a very famous author who happens to be friends with a really well-known uh, illustrator, they might connect. But generally, it's a team effort. There's an editor, there's an art director. Often, illustrators like me never even meet the author.
Huh.
It's kind of amazing. So the editor is kind of the in-between person. The author's over here, illustrator's over here, editor is right here, and the editor is like the traffic cop. So the editor will talk to the um, author and say, I think that you have to maybe cut some things in your manuscript, or you have to make it flow better. So and then the illustrator will start, she'll or he will talk to the illustrator to make sure that the manuscript is working on both ends for both people in the artwork. So yeah, it's a back and forth.
That's very interesting. So you really don't have direct contact with the author.
No, no, and the publisher doesn't want that. So for anybody out there is writing a manuscript, do not try to find your own illustrator. Just get your manuscript as good as you can and then send it out to like authors and illustrators. And if there are people who've written, there's an organization called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, or SCBWI. And go to that site, scbwi.com, and they'll have all kinds of information about how to publish your book, how to make contacts with editors and publishers and agents. It's really good. So, yeah.
Very interesting. And I think you talked about this a little bit, but what is your favorite medium? Do you do for illustrating? Do you do all by pencil and art? Do you do any painting?
I use watercolors.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I use tube watercolors that I mix together. And here are, okay, another drawer. Here we go. Okay, so these are my tube watercolors.
Wow.
And I mix them in something called a watercolor nest. So I'm going to go down here to our cupboard. So here are my brushes. And these are sable tip brushes, watercolor brushes. And then I mix colors together in, this is like, it's made out of ceramics. It's kind of like an egg carton, but you can squeeze paint into these and then use water and mix your brush and then paint on the surface of the paper with that. So it's a little like a watercolor box. Sometimes I use like watercolor boxes that you would find in a classroom, but I like the tube kinds. You can kind of mix things up a little more with those. So yeah.
I'm impressed with how well organized everything is.
Oh no, no. And believe me, I cleaned up a little bit before I started talking to you.
I can't imagine having to pull at something that quickly. I would be like, wait, hold on. And then my last question is, do you have any advice for future authors and illustrators?
Yes, I do. Write every day, draw every day, draw or write a minimum of 15 minutes a day, and just carry around a sketchbook. Let's see. See, I have a whole drawer. Here's my drawer full of sketchbooks. And some of these sketchbooks have are also notebooks. So see, I write down notes. I jot down notes on, I have sketches. I just did some sketches of foxes. Also, another thing that I like to do is you can go to university libraries. You don't have to go to Harvard to go to Harvard's library system, and you can sign in, get a little card, and go in and look at drawings by Randolph Caldecott or various authors and illustrators. But my advice would be, don't worry if you draw a lot, you will get better and better and better. So don't stop. Once you start, don't stop drawing. You can find all kinds of ways to learn going to museums and libraries. It would be really cool. So just keep doing it. Don't stop.
So
Just
that's
keep
awesome
trying.
advice.
Yeah.
Um, I'm so sad that you couldn't come to our school, but it was so cool of you to come on here because we got to see your studio and take a little tour. So thank you so much for coming on with us and answering our questions. Again, we're really sad we didn't get to meet you in person, but thank you so much for taking the time out of your day.
Oh, my pleasure. And stay happy and healthy and thank you for having me come into your homes like this. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Stay happy and healthy as well.
Okay.